Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. The World Economic Forum is set to hold its annual Davos Summit from January 22nd to January 25th in Switzerland. The event will be attended by world leaders, economists, business persons, journalists and political leaders. It will also witness participation of around 3,000 individuals. A wide range of issues are likely to be discussed at the event. There will be a total of 130 participants from India, more than China's 109. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the opening session of the World Economic Forum last year, becoming the first Indian Prime Minister in 2 decades to join the world's top business leaders in the resort town. However, this year, Prime Minister Modi will give the event a miss. US President Donald Trump, who addressed the summit in 2018, will also not be attending this year amid a government shutdown back home. British Prime Minister Theresa May will also give the annual event a miss to focus on Brexit. France's Emmanuel Macron and Russia's Vladimir Putin have also decided to stay away from the summit. Meanwhile, China's economy has grown at its slowest pace in almost 3 decades last year. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the opportunities for India as the world looks inwards. Joining me on the program today are Ajay Dua, former Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, A.K. Bhattacharya, Editorial Director of the Business Standard, and Abhinav Prakash, Assistant Professor, Delhi University. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Dua, let me begin the program with you. Let's put into perspective and let's first try and understand what the Davos Summit is all about and the purpose of the World Economic Forum.
As we all know, it's one of the largest annual gatherings of leading global businessmen of the world. At one point of time, neither the Chinese nor the Russians used to be represented well in this conference, but over the last decade or so, that gap has also been filled up. This is a private initiative of a Swiss gentleman, but which has now received recognition through participation, I would say, and support, sponsorships, to this event, which has turned out to be probably the world's largest gathering of businessmen to discuss issues not only of business, but also the peripheral related issues which could impact business. So you could have sessions on politics, human rights, those kind of issues as well. India has been participating in it for several years. And I recall that in 2006, India had been made a partner for the event there. And at that point of time, probably we had over 100 businessmen from India, 4 union cabinet ministers attending it. And since then, the Indian participation has only been increasing. This year, probably we wouldn't have as many ministers with the impending budget here on the 1st of February, and the finance minister who was supposed to go is probably not there. The importance of this, if I could say, of the World Economic Forum is, of course, several plenary sessions which get conducted, large sessions,
right.
But the meetings on the sides between businessmen, between government officials,
and
politicians,
heads of states as well.
And heads of states, as well as the business delegates who participate there. A large number of, I wouldn't say signing of deals, but exchanging of ideas which later fructify into the transactions,
right,
all get worked upon at this forum almost every year.
Right. Mr. Bhattacharya, over the years, has the summit been able to achieve its goal?
Well, World Economic Forum is a summit without any stated or publicized agenda. It's a summit which is conceived and executed on the principle of informality. Discussions take place at a very informal level, even in the closed door sessions, and I have had the privilege of attending many of them. The discussions are always off the record. Consultations are made in an open and free environment, except the plenary sessions which are on record. So therefore, to say that Whether it achieves the goal or not probably would be difficult to answer. But what we can say is this, that this has become the world's premier platform where world leaders can meet on platform which is neither government nor private. So you have seen President Trump last year, you had seen Prime Minister Narendra Modi last year, Chinese Premier Xi was there. So I think everybody goes there. But compared to that, if you come to this World Economic Forum meeting, this is probably one of the very few World Economic Forum summits where, for a variety of reasons, you don't see the US President, you don't see the British Prime Minister, you don't see the French President, you don't see the Chinese President, you don't see the Indian Prime Minister, you don't see the Russian President. So, and this actually tells you a lot about the state of the world economy.
Right.
Wherein the problems at home are so pressing for whatever reasons. Europe is going through pangs of a kind of industrial slowdown. Germany, which is the engine of the Europe's growth, is actually experienced a contraction in its output in the third quarter of 2018.
Right.
And in the fourth quarter, most probably it will see contraction again. And technically it will be declared recession in Germany. France, that is a major problem. Britain is going through the Brexit woes. US has got a government shutdown. India is going through election. The Chinese, they are experiencing a slowdown that's worrying everybody in the world.
Right.
So therefore, this is the background in which the World Economic Forum this year is holding its meeting. And the subject is very interesting. Subject is the fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah.
And that is causing a bigger uncertainty in the entire Indian global international economic environment.
Right.
So that's the set. So to describe what goals it has achieved will be very difficult to discuss in this kind of a scenario.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking us through that
yeah.
background so very beautifully. You know, that having been said, Abhinav Prakash, has the World Economic Forum Davos Summit really outlived its utility?
Well, before coming to that point, I'd like to add something to what the sir just said. Recently, India conducted its own flagship conference on geopolitics and geoeconomics, Raisina Dialogue. This title was very apt with describing the world situation. The new a word reorder, new geometries, fluid partnership, and uncertain outcomes. So what we are seeing today in the world is that the old certainties are breaking down. The old partnerships do not work. EU is dysfunctional. We see the US and China trade war happening. We see the new technology, the fourth industrial revolution, completely disrupting the world supply chain and the world economic organization. And also we are seeing a hyper backlash against the globalization in the advanced countries. This is the backdrop to this World Economic Forum. As per saying that it has outlived its utility, I do not think so, because as the sir recently remarked that it is basically an informal forum to exchange ideas and to make sense about the world. So it has no agenda as to what to do, but to bring the people, business leaders, politicians, academicians, and different kind of activists together and to decide and to make sense of what is happening in the world in the coming few years. I think what we are seeing here is simply the reflection of what is happening around the world. As you know, lots of disruptions, political disruptions are happening. But what I think is going to happen is that we are going to see a more and more inward-looking policies by the advanced countries. I don't think it can be reversed anymore. The Britain will leave EU one way or the other. US-China trade war is not going to cool down anytime soon. Russia and all other European countries are going to be embroiled in their own internal conflicts and tensions and economic problems. So we are going to see a world in which India will have to navigate its own way rather than relying on some wisdom coming from World Economic Forum or any other organization.
Right.
So we have to navigate our own instabilities and we have to chart our own way forward.
Absolutely. All right. You know, Mr. Dua, what shape is the world economy going to take really, because of all the issues that have been mentioned by the previous two panelists? You have Brexit, you have the you have the trade war between US and China, you have the slowdown the slowdown that doesn't seem to end really as far as the Chinese are concerned, then you have the US shutdown as well. That's all. Even that seems to be a problem. You know, Europe too, facing so many issues with the protests in Greece, in France, and so on and so forth.
Certainly, I think what happens in 2019 is going to be dependent upon a host of issues, global issues. I would think the first of it is again going to be what happens to the price of or availability of crude oil in the world. The reason being, most of the emerging markets are importers, whether be it China, India, and the people who are driving the economy. And as of now, it looks like, again, it's bouncing up. We've seen it 20%, the current price, Brent index is 20% higher than the lowest it had achieved last year, which was in December. It's crossed the $60 barrel mark. If the US output of oil is increasing, which it has, shale and other kind of things, then OPEC has now resorted to cuts. Already we saw last month a cut of 0.75 million barrels per day, which after the December meeting now has been set at 1.2 million barrels per day, most of it to come from Russia and Oman. So if the oil prices are kept up, I would think that's going to slow down further the growth in the oil importing nations. That means China as well as India in particular. Second concern is going to be the China-US trade. Whatever we might say that, or the bravado which might be put up by either side that we are not suffering, we are as if we are inflicting wounds only at the other.
Right.
Proof of the pudding is the Chinese rate of growth is now estimated to be 6.6 for the whole year, the lowest since 1990. That means 10 plus 18 in 28 years. And the Chinese are also no longer immune from any global happening, be it the impact of what happens from the US, what will happen from crude, what will happen to other commodity prices. It could further slow down.
Right.
And 1/3 of the global GDP growth really comes from China. 2/3 is what is accounted for by the rest of the world. So if the Chinese slowdown occurs, the rest of the world also
will also follow.
down.
Yeah.
Third is this issue of what's happening in the US. Political uncertainty. The US, no one can deny that political uncertainty is over. The Democrats versus the Republicans,
yeah.
I would say resurgence in the Democrats who now hold the lower house, the Congress, is now held by them. That could impact, and you're seeing the impact of them on the Mexico wall.
Yeah.
They are not clearing it. As a result, you have the shutdown. The longest shutdown in the history of the US
yeah.
is already reached, and there is no sight, solution seems to be in sight. In the US, now there is a feud, which earlier was probably, not above the surface,
right,
between the US Fed and the President administration.
Right.
The Jeremy Powell has short of admitting that. The US President also, of course, said, now the problem is the US Fed. He said it in as many words.
Right.
It's a question of time before the Fed governor hits back. Or the Fed chairman also says, yes, the US administration. What happens is, then the interest rates, etc., liquidity issues which the Fed controls,
right,
they are going to be having impact on
Absolutely.
the US growth.
Absolutely.
And finally, I would just flag what's been said. Brexit is not only a cause for concern for the US, it is also a cause for the continued prosperity of the EU.
Yeah. So
after all,
so Britain and EU is what you're saying. Yes.
And that's between the US, China, Brexit, Europe, Britain, India. I think that's where the global economy is going to see its impact, and all looks adverse to me as of now.
Okay, the picture looks